Good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for week 7 of our journey together from hungry ghosts to being human without stopping in hell. At the moment, your microphones are muted and can't be unmuted until after the talk and when we get into the questions and answers. But your chat facility is available if you need to send me a chat message, or if you would like to put a question in the chat field, that would be okay, but nothing too distracting, I hope. Recording is on, and I'll hopefully edit the video on Thursday or Friday and get it on YouTube by the weekend. But let's start with a recap on where we are on this journey. Bearing in mind that this suggested path, well, it's not even suggested really. I keep going back to this reality that these are the things that I would have liked to have heard 23 years ago when I woke up one morning sober and wanted to stay sober. I wanted to change my life. But for 2 years I went through misery. I moved from one hell realm of the hungry ghost, insatiable craving, just to other hell realms, the self-torture hell realm, and the animal hell realm, just surviving, just getting by. But after a couple of years, I started to dip my toe into the Buddhist pond, as it were, and my life started to get better. So largely these things are what I would have liked to have heard 23 years ago when I woke up sober. So we started with truth and commitment, and it's truth and truthfulness. It's the truth of impermanence, and that life is inherently difficult, and that we take things very personally, and that just causes more suffering. The truth of karma, that our actions do have results. As the abbot of Wat Tampi Bok used to say, actions do not die. So this satcha, this recognition of the truth and a commitment to the truth, as a noble decision, as a noble motivation, as a noble aspiration, or even formally, it can be taken as a vow, as a formal commitment. And for me, this satcha, this commitment to the truth, commitment to a new life, is an embodied intentionality. Intentionality being the driving force of karma. The second stopping off point on this journey is generosity. Dana in Buddhist terms, generosity of thoughts, words and deeds. An attitude of generosity and the acts of giving. And for tonight's talk, particularly the act of being of service. The third stopping off point is this commitment to living in harmony with these suggestions for harmlessness. Living in harmony with ourselves and with our community. A commitment to harmlessness, which again is another form of generosity, is another form of giving, it's another attitude of generosity. So this commitment not to harm ourselves or anyone else, not to take anything that's not been given to us, freely given to us, not to withhold things that we should pass on, to be sexually responsible and not to be sexually irresponsible, to speak truthfully, to speak kindly, to avoid gossip and avoid slander. And lastly, to avoid taking drugs and alcohol that lead to mindlessness, that lead to more suffering. The fourth stop on this journey are the heart practices, the cultivation of universal friendliness, of compassion, joy, and of equanimity. To develop a boundless heart, to heal our wounds. We're encouraged to incline our heart and our mind in every direction, above, below, underneath, everywhere, every area, every part of our life, in public and in private, to be inclined towards these qualities of the heart: friendliness, compassion, unselfish joy, and equanimity. The fifth stop on this journey together is the practice of forgiveness for ourselves and for others. The embracing of impermanence, of cutting ourselves free from the past. Forgiving ourselves and others for not understanding, forgiving ourselves and others for the mistakes of the past. Our sixth stop, where we were last week, was looking at serenity and insight and mindfulness. This ethically focused mindfulness, a mindfulness that cares, a mindfulness that's cultivated in the service of moving away from suffering, both on and off the cushion. And then the bhavana, or the training, or the cultivation of various meditation techniques to train the untamed mind in serenity and in insight. And this week we find ourselves at fellowship and good friends. We don't have to do it alone. We can be supported in community. But let's start this week, as always, with a 15-minute meditation. Some meditation deliberately intended to calm the breath, relax the body, quieten the mind, and then moving into just a cultivation of joy, a very deliberate intention. So if you want to leave your cameras running, by all means. If you want to turn your cameras off, that's fine as well. I'm going to turn my camera off and share my screen with you. So as best as we're able, within our circumstances, within wherever we're partaking in this session, we take an upright, dignified posture, a posture that represents our heart's desire to awaken. Upright, dignified, but easeful, not stiff. And it's comfortable for you, you might let your eyes gently close. Let your face be soft and allow your jaw to relax. Let your shoulders drop back naturally to open up the heart area. Allow your arms and hands to rest easily on your thighs or in your lap. And then just get a sense of being grounded and supported. Here amongst fellow travellers, heading in the same direction, heading away from suffering, heading towards the end of suffering. A journey undertaken out of compassion and not out of aversion. For the next 10 minutes, you're invited to practice calm and pleasant abiding in the here and now. There's nowhere to go, there's nothing to be done. There's no one special to be or to become. You might take a very deep breath in, completely filling the lungs, maximum capacity, and a very long, slow breath out, deliberately, consciously, feeling the breath in the whole body. And again, a very deep, full breath in. And a very long, slow, deliberate breath out. Feeling the breath in the whole body. The Buddha's instructions for the cultivation of serenity, for the cultivation of tranquility, are seemingly very simple, but in practice very hard. He said when breathing in, you should be aware that you're breathing in. And when breathing out, you should be fully aware that you're breathing out. So we can whisper at the back of our mind, breathing in, I'm fully aware of the in-breath. Breathing out, I'm fully aware of the out-breath. Or else we can just label each breath as in and out. Or whatever method works for you. Just bringing our full awareness to each breath. Perhaps noticing the journey of the breath from the nostril all the way through the body to the navel, and then the journey of the out-breath from the navel all the way through the body, back out via the nostril. Just feeling the breath in the whole body. There's nowhere else to go, there's nothing else to do. Inevitably, your mind will wander away from your breath. That's what the mind does. It has a mind of its own. When you notice this, just smile and make a friendly, gentle, silent, non-judgmental note of not breath. And then return your whole awareness to this magical process of breathing. Our whole practice is grounded on boundless friendliness, on boundless kindness. So you're encouraged to smile inwardly, and you're encouraged to smile outwardly. You're encouraged to take delight in this moment, to take delight in this only moment. Breathing in, I'm fully aware of the in-breath. Breathing out, I'm fully aware of the out-breath. Throughout the Buddha's teachings, the cultivation of joy, cultivation of bliss is encouraged, and it's an important stopping off place on this journey to the end of suffering. It's not the end of suffering, but it's an important place to stop and take a rest. So for the next 5 minutes, we might just shift our meditation, shift our contemplation, our practice to breathing in, calming our body, using the breath to calm the body, and breathing out, smiling. Breathing in, I calm the body. Breathing out, I smile. Breathing in, I calm the body. Breathing out, I smile. In a couple of minutes, I shall ring the bell 3 times to bring this short period of meditation to a close, and you're invited at that time to maintain your posture, to maintain your meditation, to maintain your awareness, perhaps until you hear the 3rd bell, at least until you hear the 3rd bell. And in this very small way, we might start to loosen the grip of our habitual need to move away from what we perceive to be discomfort, to move towards what we perceive to be the end of discomfort, or even to move away from what we want to hold on to and not to want to let it, not to want to let it end. So this week, I hope to offer some reflections on fellowship or sangha or community and good friends. It's stop number 7 on this journey from Hungry Ghost to being human without stopping in hell. But it's no less an important stop than the other stops we've made. Good friendships serve as our basic human need for contact, our healthy desire to be supported and to support others. Our relationships in fellowship or sangha or community can be a manifestation of the many other parts of this shared journey together. So our participation in community is a manifestation of our noble intention to follow the path away from suffering, a manifestation of the noble intention to be generous, a manifestation of the noble intention not to cause harm to ourselves or anyone else, a manifestation of the noble intention to be kind, to be compassionate, to be joyous, and to be well balanced, the noble intention to be fearlessly forgiving and to forgive fearlessly, and the noble intention to practice and to support each other in formal and informal mindfulness and meditation practices. The Buddha's cousin and attendant, Ananda, said to the Buddha one day, "This is half the spiritual life, Lord, having admirable people as friends, companions, and colleagues." And the Buddha said back to him, "No, Ananda, don't say that. Having admirable people as friends, companions, and colleagues is actually the whole of the spiritual life." In terms of traditional Buddhist teachings, we have 3 refuges, 3 places where we go for support, for safety, for certainty and security. The first of those refuges is the Buddha himself, this confidence in this historical figure who I always, I put my own spin on it, but whenever I read these early Pali texts, in the Theravada tradition, and I read about a troubled young man and who gets to the point where for his own peace of mind, he has to leave home to go out. He'll have to leave his wife and child behind and his family behind, and a fairly comfortable existence behind, to go off in search of true happiness, because what he had was not making him happy. So I always perceive a troubled young man, but someone who, through great investigative powers and insights, came up with these wonderful insights into life as a process, how we build a self from moment to moment, how we build our world around us from moment to moment, always based on the contact we have, the sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches that arise. His simple insight into, well, life is quite uncomfortable, life is stressful, life's impersonal, and that's true for everything, because it's impermanent, it's temporary. Nothing can provide lasting satisfaction. So these wonderful insights into life as a process, and the approach he takes to come to terms with that, I have great respect and confidence in this historical man. I don't see him as a god or someone to be worshipped, but I have great respect and great confidence in a lot of what he came up with. And so the Buddha is the first refuge that we might go to. What would the Buddha say? The second refuge are his teachings, the teachings that he did actually hand down. As far as we know and how historically true they are, it's quite clear that many of them have been enhanced, shall we say. We won't use the word doctored, but enhanced, to make them simpler to understand, or to make them simpler to remember, bearing in mind that for hundreds and hundreds of years these talks weren't written down. They were just memorized by groups of monks who kept reciting them. So the repetitious nature of these texts and the numerous lists and lists and lists and lists of lists were all there to make the memorizing of these early talks easier. So we might reference, what do the teachings say? What does the Dharma say as our second refuge, our second place of safety, our second place of security? And the third refuge, the third place we might go for security, for support, for safety, for certainty, is a refuge of community. In Buddhist terms, it's known as the Sangha. And for a long time, and even now in certain circles, Sanghas reserved for monastic practice. But more and more, even many monastics are admitting that we now have quite active lay communities who should be considered as a Sangha. But whether we refer to them as Sanghas or fellowships or communities, it's the same thing. It's a group of people, like-minded people, we go to for safety, security and certainty. For the rest of this session, I will use the term Sangha, fellowship and community fairly interchangeably to mean the same thing. In terms, the Buddhists put it in terms of the importance of good relationships or good friendships for the monastic community. He said, monks, in regard to external factors, I do not perceive of a single factor so helpful as good friendship. Good friendship for a learner, someone who's not yet attained the perfection of the heart, but lives aspiring to that supreme security from bondage. A monk who has a good friend abandons what is unwholesome and develops what is wholesome. Now here's perhaps a more modern description of what might be a fellowship. A support community promoting and assisting in building and maintaining motivation to abstain from harmful actions, to support with coping with urges, to supporting managing thoughts, feelings and behaviour, and to support to balance momentary and enduring satisfactions. Now this isn't a description of a Buddhist Sangha or a Dharma fellowship or a secular community, but it describes the SMART recovery process. SMART sees addiction as a learned behaviour, which it seeks to unlearn using cognitive behavioural principles. Studies suggest that group involvement reduces substance use, healthcare costs, and has additional benefits relating to self-efficacy. I shall say that again, self-efficacy, social support, depression, anxiety, and even coping with stress. So peer support or mutual aid groups can be very beneficial, whatever flavour they come in. The Buddha's thoughts on good friendship for lay people. What is the accomplishment in good friendship? It's when a gentleman resides in a town or village, and in that place there are householders or their children who may be young or old, but they are mature in conduct, accomplished in confidence, ethics, generosity and wisdom. That person associates with them, converses and engages in discussion, and they emulate the same kind of accomplishment in confidence, in ethics, in generosity and in wisdom. So it's by mixing with people, we pick up their habits, we pick up their traits. If they're good traits, we pick up good traits. If they're bad traits, perhaps we pick up bad traits. Before I got sober, as I say, 23 years ago, I'd been a trade union representative for a number of years and held a number of different positions within the trade union. But one of my jobs was representing employees on disciplinary behaviour. And I would think a year to 18 months before I got sober, I was involved in 3 different disciplinary actions against employees, all involving alcohol. And all 3 employees were without doubt alcoholic or with serious alcohol problems. In 2 of those cases, the company were very understanding, and due to circumstances within those two separate cases, 2 separate places, both individuals were offered help and were allowed to continue working. And in the 3rd instance, the company saw the behaviour as gross misconduct, and the employee was dismissed. And even though we went to appeal to an employment tribunal, the employment tribunal upheld the company's view. And through all 3 of these disciplinary hearings, I couldn't help but being very uncomfortable. And that in many cases, my own drinking was far worse than some of these guys. Yet here I was trying to defend them, trying to keep their jobs for them, trying to stop their lives from falling apart. So when I finally got sober, when I finally made that choice to live a life without alcohol or other drugs, other intoxicants, I suddenly found myself without support, feeling very alone, very vulnerable. And because I represented one of these guys actually lived quite close to me, and I was aware that he was going to local AA meetings. And I was too ashamed to go along to the same AA meeting, too embarrassed. So I didn't go along to an AA meeting for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then finally, when I had to grasp at something, I'd actually been reading a copy of the 12 Traditions and 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, and a lot of it I found very helpful. But one has to keep in mind that that's all I had. That was the only reference point I had at that time. But I eventually I took myself off to a nearby town where I knew that my work colleague wouldn't go because he didn't drive, and this place would have been too far for him to go. And I attended a couple of AA meetings, and I suppose the short answer is I didn't feel at home. They weren't, although many of the ideas, with the written ideas within the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, I found supportive. Actually attending a meeting, as friendly as they were and as welcoming as people were, it wasn't going to be my home. So after 2 meetings, I stopped going, and so I had no source of group support, as it were. And shortly after that, I got myself into therapy with a Gestalt therapist, and shortly after that, I found this link, this very fortuitous series of events that led me to becoming the chairman of a charity in Reading in England, taking drug addicts out to a monastery in Thailand. And the mixture of the therapy, starting therapy, and the becoming chairman of that charity took the place of community, took the place of the Sangha, took the place of fellowship for me. And I threw myself into that, into developing websites, into developing communications with the monastery, into helping individuals get to Thailand, get there and get home safely. And for the next 10 years, that was largely where I drew my support, by offering service. But what I did notice in my efforts to helping people to get to Thailand and back safely was many of them weren't. Many of them, well, most of them were, but a small percentage weren't. The treatment in Thailand it's not a miracle cure. Even to this day, it's still not a miracle cure. And for some people, it just didn't work. So there were a few people that were relapsing, and relapsing badly, to the point of being found dead in hotel rooms or walking in front of lorries. And they either weren't coming home at all, or they were coming home in body bags. And that saddened me, and particularly the knowledge that outside of that monastic setting, that very unique specialist monastic setting in Thailand, there was no support for those guys. The teachings at the monastery were very focused on karma, on actions and the results, and on satya, on this commitment in making a promise and sticking to it. If you didn't keep your promise, there would be karmic consequences. And clearly there were. If you kept your commitment, if you kept your satya, then your life got better. And if you didn't, your life was likely to go down hell back into the hell realms. So I was very conscious of this. And when someone told me that there was going to be a Buddhist recovery conference in Los Angeles, I just jumped at the opportunity, and I booked a flight and got a place on the at the conference. I even offered some to present at the conference, but it was too late. But they put a lot of my stuff in the brochure, a lot of stuff about this monastic approach, this satya approach to recovery was in that inaugural brochure. And one of the breakout sessions that I was particularly interested in was a breakout session where people who'd set up Buddhist recovery groups were talking about their experience. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And there was a common theme came out from these different people from different traditions in different parts of them. They were all American, sort of much far advanced from where we were in the UK. But they were from different traditions, different parts of the US, and they related their experience. And I had it in mind that the general theme was that, you know, it took at least 12 months before anything got going in these groups. On the last day of the conference, we were asked in our various breakout groups, you know, what we would do, what we would take away from this conference. And I committed to starting a Buddhist recovery group when I got home to England. And that's what I did. Within a few weeks, I started a sit and share meeting, or a Buddhist recovery group. It wasn't quite sit and share at the original meetings. But in November 2009, I started a Buddhist recovery group in Newbury in Berkshire. And I hired a room on Wednesday evenings every week for a year. And sometimes people dropped in, sometimes people dropped out. But largely for most of the year, I sat on my own. I just kept going down there and being there. If someone was going to turn up, I would be there. My wife at the time, in the middle of winter, would say, "Vince, why are you going down there? There won't be anyone in there. Only a fool would go out in weather like this." But I'd say, "No, you know, I'll be there just in case someone turns up." But after a year, you know, I couldn't keep that. I couldn't afford to keep hiring a room every week to sit on my own. A great lesson in humility. So I dropped the meetings back to once a month, and people started to come, and then we made them every couple of weeks, and more people, and then we made them every week. And we had a small but regular Sangha on a weekly basis for a few years. When I revisited my notes from the conference, I'd actually got it wrong. The people at the conference weren't saying it normally takes 12 months to get a group going. They actually said that on average, it was like 2 years. So I pretty much fell into that place. So it took 2 years to get an active group going. But bearing in mind, back in 2009, 2010, Buddhist recovery groups were a fairly new phenomenon, and you know, you were pretty much reinventing the wheel, or inventing the wheel from scratch in how you would present in a Buddhist recovery. Also at that time, I was conscious of the lack of Buddhist recovery resources, both for people leaving the monastery in Thailand, and for people who not going through that process of detox. That's when I started to offer Hungry Ghost retreats, to offer an extra service, as it were. And that's when the Fifth Precept organization, from which these talks stem from, came into being as well, to offer a framework, which at that point there wasn't a distinguishable framework to work from, just offering some ideas, I say, based on the things I would have liked to have heard when I woke up sober in 1996. During those first 10 years of being sober, I set up an online support group for the people coming out of Wat Tam Krae Bok, and for people inquiring about going to Wat Tam Krae Bok for a herbal detox in Thailand, and trying to offer, you know, a form of Buddhist support. The Fifth Precept organization is intended to be peer-led. I wouldn't particularly say it is at this moment in time. Perhaps I need to do more work around that, and I would certainly like to, in taking it forward, establish it as a not-for-profit charity with a board of trustees, and a much more formal setup, and a much more clearly defined, you know, peer-led structure. one of the main benefits coming out of the sit and share organization, sit and share groups. There are various groups that pop up around the world. Normally when I offer Hungry Ghost retreats, there's a sit and share group pops up for a while. But they really need supporting. And the longest running group is in County Clare in Ireland, where a good friend of mine, Owen, has been running a sit and share group since 2012. And there are many benefits of attending a sit and share meeting or any other type of Buddhist recovery meeting. And there are details of sit and share meetings, a format, and some suggested script at the back of the little Hungry Ghost booklet, whereby the host or leader of each week's or each meeting is a volunteer. It's a different person every time, hopefully, and they get to choose a topic and offer reflections on that topic, and everyone gets to share on that topic. But the meeting preamble and the format can be changed to suit the group as appropriate. Now I wouldn't call this group the fifth precept group. I would call it something entirely different, because now I have a greater understanding of addictions and compulsions, and all five precepts, living in harmony with all five precepts, is just so important. Not just the fifth precept. So the fifth precept, or the sit and share format of a meeting, can be adapted to whatever your desired outcomes are. And such meetings have potential to cultivate harmlessness as individuals and within our communities. Such meetings develop and cultivate ethically focused mindfulness, and we get to practice meditation together, to calm the breath, to relax the body, and to quiet the mind. We can even develop an accepting relationship to our body through mindful movement. Now, normally if I'm offering a face-to-face meeting, then in between the opening meditation and the contemplation of a topic, there's 10 minutes of Qigong. And the instructions are on the fifth precept website, and there's an old video on there of a friend demonstrating Qigong mindful movement. Now, I've just done a brand new demonstration video in my kitchen next door of these 6 movements that form this mindful movement, and it's meditation in motion, and it brings the meditation into the body. But I think it's going to be this video is going to be premiered at this weekend coming as part of an online retreat for New Life Foundation in Northern Thailand. I've offered them this 14-minute video to show a couple of times over the weekend of mindful movement. So if you're running a sit and share meeting or any other meeting of that type, if you wanted some mindful movement, there's a resource there. Such meetings develop concentration and contemplation skills and non-judgmental self-reflection and investigation. And they help to develop talking and listening skills, being able to express ourselves and being able to listen to other people. The meeting in 6 Mile Bridge, in County Clare, is particularly heartening, as I attend occasionally, and I've seen people develop over a number of years from having no emotional vocabulary, no way of expressing themselves, to being able to express how they're feeling, and having a framework and language now to express how they're feeling and to describe their experience. It's a wonderful thing. And of course, such a group, whatever label you put on it, we cultivate a group awareness and identity. So people need support, not just in our addictions, but in our commitment to moving away from suffering and moving towards the end of suffering. The English monk Ajahn Sucitto, he says we need community because you can't see the back of your own head, which I think is a rather lovely expression, because obviously monks have their heads shaved, and to shave someone's head because they can't see the back of their own head. To be of service and be of community, which is a wonderful image. I've enjoyed, I say enjoyed, I've ordained twice myself in Thailand, and that process of having your head shaved by someone is is quite a thing. The American monk, affectionately known as Tan Jeff or Arjan Jeff, he says that we can't see through our own delusions, which is rather like not being able to see the back of our head. So we need community to help us see when we're deluded. And in certain fellowships, be they 12-step or otherwise, certainly not at the moment within the 5th Precept Fellowship, but perhaps within, I'm not sure about Refuge Recovery or Recovery Dharma, or even 8-step recovery groups. But, you know, there's the opportunity to to have a mentor, a sponsor. And in the Buddhist tradition, from 2,600 years ago, the Buddha says, if one finds a person who points out one's faults and reproves one should follow such a wise and sagacious counselor as one would follow a guide to hidden treasure. Wonderful way of putting it. The Buddha has many, many suttas regarding friendships and sangha and fellowship. But I'm particularly drawn to one sutta, the Sigalovada Sutta or Sigalovata Sutta, which is a talk on the guidelines, the Buddha's guidelines for lay people to live a happy, fulfilling life, which includes an awareness of good and bad friendships. The talk starts when the Buddha meets this young man on the road, and the young man has just bathed in the river and put on clean clothes. His hair's still wet. And the young man's paying homage in 6 directions, and the Buddha gives him a very long talk on how to pay homage correctly. Now, as with all things Buddhist, there are lists involved. And this particular sutta, I ended up putting it into a PowerPoint presentation, because there are 32 lists in here, numerous items. And the easiest way for me to understand it and to present it was to put it into a PowerPoint presentation, just as a list of lists. And the Buddha goes into all sorts of advice here on how much you should save and how you should look after your wife and children, how you should behave in public. But I particularly would like to draw your attention to his advice about friendships. And if I can just share my screen. So within this talk, the Buddha says that there are 6 dangers inherent in bad friendships, in bad companionship. Your friends and colleagues may be rogues. They might be drunkards, addicts, cheats, swindlers, or thugs. I like, thinking this was 2,600 years ago, not much has changed. He says there can be 4 enemies disguised as friends: the taker, the talker, the flatterer, the reckless companion. You can tell who the taker is because they only take. They ask you for a lot while they don't give you much. They perform their duties out of fear, and they only offer you service in order to gain something. A talking friend can be identified because they're always reminding you of their past generosity, and they're always promising you future generosity. They mouth empty words of kindness, and they always claim personal misfortune when called upon to help. The flatterer can be identified by supporting both bad and good behavior indiscriminately. He doesn't give you good advice. He praises you to your face while putting you down behind your back. And the reckless companion can be identified by 4 things: They encourage you to go drinking, to go roaming at night, to go partying, to go gambling. But there are good friends as well. You recognize the four good friends: the helper, the friend who endures in times and good times and bad, the mentor, and the compassionate friend. You can recognize the helper because he protects you when you're vulnerable, and likewise your wealth. He's a refuge, or he or she is a refuge when you're afraid. And in various tasks, they offer double from what you might ask for. The mentor helps you in four ways: by restraining you from wrongdoing, by guiding you towards good actions, by telling you what you ought to know, and by importantly, by showing you the path to heaven, from hungry ghost to being human. The compassionate friend can be identified because they don't rejoice in your misfortune, but they do delight in your good fortune. They prevent others from speaking ill of you, and they encourage others to praise your good qualities. Now, this is wonderful advice for choosing good friends. And just while I'm here, maybe you'll indulge me, but there's another list within this very long talk, very long list of lists that I'm particularly drawn to. Being, as I mentioned, a trade union representative, I particularly like what the Buddha says about how you should treat your workers and your servants. The 5 ways you should treat your workers is that you allocate them work according to their aptitude. You give them work that they can do. You provide them with wages and with food. You look after your workers when they're sick. You offer your workers bonuses. You offer them special treats. And you give your workers reasonable time off from work. Now, this is 2,600 years ago. I think it's fair to say that the Buddha was a socialist. And in return, the Buddha says that if you treat your workers, if you treat your employees in this way, then they reciprocate. They're willing to start early. They're willing to finish late. They only take what you give them. They don't steal from you. They do their work well, and they promote your good reputation. So, I say the Buddha gives advice on many things, and so he gives advice there on how to recognize bad friends, how to recognize good friends. He makes friendships a very important point on the path, and I rather like his approach to how you should treat your employees. It's now time for questions and answers. Okay, there's no. I think the only question there is someone asking for a sutta reference. So, which sutta was it? The
one on good friends.
What Siddhartha Sutta? There's one about choosing bad friends and good friends. Yeah, that's it's in the long course. The long discourses. It's DN 31. You got that, Kenny? Siddhartha Sutta.
Victor Noble 31.
31. The long discourse is number 31. And it is a long discourse because it's as I say, it's got 32 lists in there, and I think it's something like 130, 140 different items listed. Okay, Kenny. So do we have any questions on friendships or community or sangha or fellowship or any comments. You know, the Buddha saw the importance of keeping good friendships. Absolutely critical. And, you know, the Siddhartha Sutta that I was just reading from, and that's for lay people, the importance for lay people to keep good friendships. That you know, you would, otherwise you'd be led astray. The company you keep will determine your behaviour. It's you know, karmic consequences. If you choose to mix in certain company, then as he said, you know, the good villager who goes out and develops good friendships within the village and discussing good topics, you know, mirroring good ethics and generosity, you know, it's good for everyone. But if you know, if you know, unfortunately, you know, if you live on a certain estate, you know, in Oxfordshire or in Oxford, you know, where the police are, you know, the enemy, where you know, drugs and alcohol are a normal way of life, that's what you become used to. That's what you become conditioned to. So, you know, the privilege, the opportunity to choose, well, you know, I'm going to avoid that, you know, these people, not out of judgment, but out of discernment. So not out of judging them, but just out of keeping ourselves safe. We have to put on our own oxygen mask first. You know, if we want to put on an oxygen mask and get fit and healthy and well, and then offer an outreach service, you know, to people still using, it is hugely important who the friendships you choose, the company you mix with, is hugely important. And you know, well done. And thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of our little temporary community, our little sangha, and to start your own sit and share group. And I would think you wouldn't be sitting on your own for a year like I did. Nowadays, there are too many people that are interested. And even if you didn't want to establish a fifth precept sit and share group, you know, there's 8-step recovery meetings, there's refuge recovery meetings, there's Dharma recovery meetings, there's heart of recovery meetings. There are so many different flavors of Buddhist recovery meetings. Or you go secular, and you know, you go smart recovery. So there's lots of flavors out there, and there's nothing to stop you, other than perhaps finances, you know, to hiring a room or getting a room in a church hall and starting your own meeting. But as I say, you've got to feel comfortable with that. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. Too often we hear of people starting groups and then relapsing because they feel under pressure. So you have to be in a good place yourself before you do that. So the question and answer cushion is still open for a little bit longer. If anyone has any questions or thoughts. If you with my camera set up, I can't see if people are waving at me, so you either have to type your...
It's Dermot here, Vince.
Hi, Dermot.
Hi, Vince. I'm actually in the car tonight. I couldn't get a quiet space, you know, and I needed to get out. So the wonders of technology, you know. I'm 4 years clean and sober last month, and I had to do 2 treatment centres, and do you know what I mean? Like, I go to AA kicking and screaming. I went there, and I tell you, I still see myself on the periphery, you know. Although I do all the service and everything else, I am looking for another avenue to give back, you know. The sit and share meetings on Zoom, I haven't felt the full community yet because it's kind of more like a bus stop. There's different people coming every week. I'm not connecting on a human level. It was great listening to Andrew there. Those close calls are invigorating, can be invigorating, you know, and I still go to my meetings and connect with other people in my situation, regardless of their beliefs. You know what I mean? I don't believe in a God or something like that. But I was wondering about the sit and share meetings, you know, which I'm a big fan of. I like them, you know, but I didn't realize I was so 12-step programmed until I went to sit and share. You know, I programmed up to the hilt, you know, I couldn't believe it, you know. And would there be any check-in, would there be any modification of a sit and share to allow people to check in? You know, how they are when they sit down to kind of build the group.
Yeah, there's no reason why. You know, it's just a framework, and it can be changed. When I offer these practices and principles in a retreat format, you know, with my Hungry Ghost hat on, teacher hat, my Hungry Ghost teacher hat on, you know, on a 5-day retreat, every morning we check in. Every morning we go round to see what's good for them, how they're feeling. The sit and share meeting on retreat, you know, each of the retreatants volunteer to host them, and generally by the second share meeting on retreat, people are saying, I've never told anyone before this. I've never told anyone this before in my life. And people are offloading things that they've never told to anyone else by the second evening. So they're very powerful container for community, for the individual and for community, to be able to express oneself and be able to listen compassionately. So I've got no problem with people making suggestions for changing the format. I've got no problems with, you know, trying anything, because a lot of this stuff I slung together 10 years ago. I'm starting to look at it more now and seeing, well, actually this needs changing, that needs changing. It'd be better to do it this way.
Appreciate that. No, it's just because, like, what I meant by that was one night we did the very first Hungry Ghost of this series. One girl unfortunately had drank just before she came onto the meeting, you know, and had we done a quick check-in, we could have kind of, you know, put her into a way, I don't know, like even on a night, you know, in a room. Anyway, it was just something I was thinking about, because some people are hanging on edge, you know, and reading a piece they just can't concentrate on 5 minutes or something like that, you know, without some kind of a word of help, you know. And anyway, that's all I was thinking, and I'm loving the course so far.
I mean, the sit and share format, you know, where the leader, you know, leads that first meditation, then they offer a little topic for contemplation, and after the 5 minutes contemplation, people share on that contemplation. But you know, half the people share on contemplation, half the people go into their story, go into their narrative, go into them. It's nothing at all to do with what we've been contemplating, but that's fine. And sometimes you have to let the meeting run and run and run, because what a particular person is saying is so important. And for them to put a time limit on them or to cut them off would be quite cruel and not very skillful. So there's lots of room there to play around with. Nothing's fixed in stone at all.
Thanks, Vince. Appreciate it.
For that.
Love to talk tonight. Thanks.
It's a, you know, I'm very happy for suggestions and for some help. You know, if someone wants to read through all the stuff and make suggestions, I'm open to it. I'm not precious about it in the least.
Thanks, Vince. We'll talk. Thanks a million.
Yeah, unless you've got a burning question, I'd like to move on to our closing and make a couple of comments and move on to our closing, short closing meditation, and then close it with some comments at the end of our meditation. So if everyone's okay, we'll I'm going to share a screen again just for the so there's no reason why we can't find a few minutes every day just to ground ourselves and find some self-balance. And even for this short period, if we just make a physical movement or a mental movement towards an upright posture, an alert posture, remember this intention to move away from suffering, to move towards the end of suffering, out of compassion, not aversion. And then it's out of compassion, with great care, that we offer these phrases to ourselves. Silently, like a whisper at the back of our mind. May I find stillness in the midst of chaos. May I be at ease in the midst of discomfort. May I be safe and well in the midst of uncertainty. May I live with kindness in the midst of all that is difficult. Maybe taking a very deep breath in and a very long, slow breath out. Just going through those phrases again. May I find stillness in the midst of chaos. May I be at ease in the midst of discomfort. May I be safe and well in the midst of uncertainty. May I live with kindness in the midst of all that is difficult. May I find stillness. May I be at ease. May I be safe and well. May I live with kindness. In the early Pali texts, I think it came up in the Sigalata Sutta, the advice to lay people. A good friend is described as a helper on the path, someone who shows us the way to heaven. And as a similarity to sit and share meetings, the Buddha said, or in the commentaries, one of the functions of a monastic good friend is to choose a subject for meditation practice for students, just like the leader of a sit and share meeting. One study of the effectiveness of 12-step fellowships makes the point that participation in mutual aid is something that someone does, not something done to them that can be expected to work regardless of whether they choose that route to recovery or embrace it once experienced. So mutual aid or group support, mutual aid or mutual support is something we do, it's not done to us. So in terms of Buddhist ignorance or Buddhist delusion, this is known as avijja in the Pali language, which means to not know. And often we're deluded or we're ignorant or we're confused because we don't know. But sometimes avijja is actually because we don't want to know. So we have to participate in fellowship to get the benefits of it. Of course, we're not bound to partake in any fellowship or sangha or community, but it might just lead to your benefit and happiness to participate in one or more as suits your personal aspirations and your personal needs. A sangha is a place of noble friendship, a place of shared values and goals, a place of mutual support, an engaged, caring and healing environment, a place of practice, accountability, guidance and self-discovery, a place of refuge, a place of belonging, a community where you can feel at home. Remember, you don't have to walk this path alone. The Buddha says that the best protection and the highest blessings on this path come from avoiding fools and associating with the wise people. He says that good friends are the whole of the path. But if your sangha, excuse me, if your sangha doesn't meet some or all of these needs, then you might contemplate the 2-foot rule. You've got 2 feet, so you can walk away. Lastly, perhaps, we should have mudita, or appreciative joy, for simply being a good friend and for having good friends. So thank you for your patience, thank you for your practice, and thank you for your presence. Next week's talk is our final talk, and I hope to bring all 7 steps together, 7 stops on this journey together, summarise them, and be open for some questions and answers and comments and complaints. So next week, I tentatively titled next week, what am I to do now? But I think I called it, what are you to do now? But really it should have been, what am I to do now? To make it more personal. As always, this talk is offered freely, openly, open heart, open hand, open mind. If you'd like to offer dana, if you'd like to offer a donation to my livelihood, to the cost of running these talks, the link is on the Hungry Ghost website under dana donations, or there'll be a link on the YouTube video, in the comments on the YouTube video. There are sit and share meetings running online sit and share meetings running on Thursdays and Mondays at 7:30 UK time. And hopefully I'll see you for our final week together next Wednesday at 7:30 UK time. If you'd like to unmute your microphone and say cheerio, goodbye and farewell, whatever, you're more than welcome to.